Yeah, I know. Remember that time that Kpop Demon Hunters pretty much took over the world? Oh, they still have? Okay. In this video, I'm going to show you guys how I made Rumi Sword from Kpop Demon Hunters. And this is the first time I've ever done anything like this. In the past, I've only made smaller things like statues or figurines, but never a full sword and never one that lights up. So keep watching to see some of my tips, some of the things that I learned along the way, as well as those awesome dumpster fires that always seem to happen. I'm going to show you guys how I 3D printed this, sanded, painted, and even put together some of the electronics. Let's go check it out. Let's jump in first and talk about the blade. So as you can see, I decided to go with 3D modeling and printing because I really wanted to be strong and rigid. I didn't create this 3D model, but I'll put the link in the description below if you want to get it for yourself. The artist was really great and I had no problems with it, but if you stick around, I'll show you some of the modifications that I made to some of the parts to fit the needs that I wanted for this build. So printer wise, I have a Bamboo A1 and it has a moving bed, and the problem that I found is that for tall objects like pieces of a blade, that those pieces start to move once you get to a certain height. And since I'm pretty new with the bamboo, I really didn't know too many ways to troubleshoot this. I first used these sort of little cones that I saw someone use that have a bridge attached to it. That didn't work. I also tried this approach where I kind of laid it down and I used the tree supports with some rafts, and it kind of got a little ways through, didn't end up working. I even tried just the basic supports and not the trees, and as you can see, I did not have a good time with that either. It either looked all crazy or it was solid as a rock like this one. But then I saw someone suggest that you use a support of your own that you make, so I ended up using what I call the comb, and as you can see, it looks like one. It's got the tall support and then the teeth that go over and connect to your piece, and I tried to run that with just the comb and it failed. It was still too wobbly, so I regrettably also did the tree supports, as you can see, and it uses up a lot of extra filament. Don't at me, bro. But that was my most successful print and I decided to go with it. The other thing that ended up biting me in the tissue over this was that I did not really think about how the comb pieces would attach to the piece, to the blade piece, and I ended up having to do some extra work to sand it down and get the little nubs off. I just didn't like that. It didn't look good. It was a big piece sticking off the side like that. Another detail I want to discuss is that I used clear filament thinking, oh yeah, this is going to be perfect because I'm going to have it lighted on the inside. But then I didn't really think through, well duh, you're going to have layer lines, you're going to have infill, and that's something I wish that I had looked into more before going through with this sort of procedure of the blade. And in the end, I also decided that I wanted to sand it down, partially because of the layer lines, but also because I wanted to diffuse the light. And the purpose of that is so you can get a soft glow from your lights instead of something a little more sharp where you can see every single bulb perhaps. And really, I think this approach of sanding ended up actually making it look nice and muted on the outside of the blade pieces. Make sure to stick around to see the paint job part of this video, and then you can see what it looks like all together. But I would say that if I had to redo this again, I definitely would take a closer look at how to manipulate layer lines and infill, or try to do without in some way, so that it honestly does look as clear as possible and as glass-like as possible. For those of you out there who have printed, you probably know that's not an easy thing. Much easier said than done. The next roadblock that I experienced had to do with inserting this acrylic tube to the inside of the blade for stability. I did my measurements ahead of time, but the lesson that I learned is that with 3D printing and you have two parts that need to fit together, you have to give them a little bit extra space, just a little bit more than you would think. And I don't know all the science behind it. I know sometimes that heat or other temperature conditions within your printing area have to do with it, but just make sure to give it a little bit of breathing room. And as you can see, I'm using a Gorilla brand super glue. I really like Gorilla, it's pretty solid, no pun intended. I also have a plastic concrete glue that seems to work well. I find that you just kind of need to use whatever's best for your project that you're working on. So before I painted the whole thing, I kind of just wanted to test on a sample. I bought 3 different paints, a fluorescent pink, a bright cyan, and then a more fluorescent purple. I just kind of wanted to see how they'd look together. So, as I mentioned before, I wanted to make just a couple of small modifications for my own purpose with this build, and it has to do with this pommel section of the hilt. As you can see here, I took it into Blender. I was able to cut it into different pieces and then enlarge or squish or whatever that I needed to do in order to allow me to put a battery in the back of this. So once I had the sizing in a pretty good place, I measured a battery, I essentially made it inside a blender, and then I created a cavity for it to fit into. The other modification, as you can see here, is I added a thread for easy access. And we can also ignore those ugly little crispy edges that the print job did here, but don't worry, I fixed them up. So I won't go into detail on how to spray paint or prime, but I will say that I use the Rust-Oleum Automotive Primer 2-in-1 filler and sander. What a mouthful. And I put the link in the description below if you want to check it out. But I like this. I've seen different people suggest different primers, but I think it's a really nice primer because you can sit there and use it and continue to spray even if it looks like you're kind of just like soaking your print in the primer, and that can be a good thing if it doesn't have tons of tiny details, because then that primer will fill them up really nicely. That way, once you get to the wet sanding or any further sanding, or even like the Bondo stage like you see here, potentially that sander, even on the initial go, will do a pretty good job. So now, Bondo. So for those bigger spots and any kind of help that you need filling layer lines, I use Bondo glazing putty. This thing is magic, and what's really nice about it is that you can kind of just take the putty straight up like this and work it into your bigger divots or layer lines, whatever that you need to do. I kind of just decided to be straightforward and use a gloved finger. I've seen people use other applicators. You can use like a scrap of foam or a little piece of wood like a toothpick or whatever you need to do to get that job done. But essentially you're filling these bigger spaces or holes with the Bondo and later sanding it down once it dries. That way it makes everything nice and smooth, or like I said, fills in holes and gaps for the most part. Now, not seen here, another great method is to mix this. I believe usually a good mix is 2-to-1 with this and acetone. It thins it down and essentially makes it so that it can spread out and fill a lot more of your gaps better. Say if you have a ton of layer lines, definitely mix it with acetone. Again, not seen here, and I apologize for that. I mostly just plugged it up with the finger. I really hope that I can say that and nobody gets mad at me for that. And the next pro tip I've got for you is that there is no limit to the priming and sanding stage of your 3D print. The goal is that you need to get it to whatever level of texture or shininess, smoothness that it needs to be. So feel free to prime it and sand it and repeat that step as often as possible. I know on these I probably did them about 3 times each and cleaned also in between, and it ended up turning out pretty nice. And I won't gab through this part, but I just want you guys to enjoy the majesty of gold paint. I love gold! I actually do. This was a really fun part. I really loved painting everything gold. It looked just like amazing, and enjoy gold. Bonus clip. So I'm doing all this hard work and putting this together, and I had my daughter start to hold the sword, and guess what? It was very tall compared to her. And I knew this, but you know what? I was kind of optimistically thinking it would just be fine measurement wise. So I went ahead and printed a smaller version, and she had a blast. I let her do the paint work on it. And stick around, I'll go ahead and show this towards the end of the video, but it was a lot of fun making a smaller version too that she could actually use. It's going to be really hard to follow up to that really advanced and skillful transition, you know, like electricity around the letters and all that. Okay, sorry. That was a bad attempt at a dorky dad joke. So electronics. I want to say that I am not going to teach electronics in this video. I'm just going to show you what I did. I am in no way an expert. I'm very much so a novice. At the most in the past, I've only ever done a couple of LED lights in small little creations, 3D prints or sculpting. And so for this, it definitely required me to step up my game a little bit more, you know, hop on the YouTubes and learn some things. And that would be my greatest suggestion to you. The best thing you can ever do, not only in life, doesn't matter what it is, but if you're trying to make or build something, is you set that goal, that end goal, and then you set all the little goals that can lead you to the end goal. That way you can learn or practice what you need to do in order to get where you're going. So I probably should have said this at the beginning of the electronics clip, but I had a very basic, simple setup for this build. Essentially, I have the connector that hooks up to the 9-volt battery. It's a 2-wire. And then I bought a very simple 2-way switch. And I bought some wiring. And then I bought an LED strip. And same as all the other products, I will link all this stuff in the description below. Again, this was a pretty simple job. In the future, I would love to do something with an actual small circuit board, or maybe even RGB LEDs. This was just a one light. I think it's, I forget what you call it, like a bright white LED strip. So essentially what I did for this is I took one wire coming from my power source and I connected, I think, to a wire here, but you could connect it directly to your LED strip. And sorry for my terrible camera work. You're focusing in on my dirty fingers that have come from sanding and stuff, or as you can see now in the background, it's focused. And then let's get back to it. The other wire from your power source, you're going to connect to the switch, and then that switch you're going to wire it on over to your continued wire, or again the other side of the LED switch. So kind of pro tip, I don't know if you'd commonly say it's a pro tip. You see me with that sort of black rubber tube that I have over the wire like that, and in a previous clip you saw me put the wire tube over it, and then you use either a heat gun or a blow dryer to shrink it. It's this nice little sort of rubber shrinky thing that you can put over wire connections. You don't need to do it here, like on a switch, but I'm a little cuckoo because of my photographer days when I would accidentally go to grab unplug a cable or something and get zapped. So I tend to just put them on wherever I kind of think needs to work. So semi-pro tip, but also not necessary. So I don't remember why that I decided to solder the other wire to the switch. I would say don't do that. I think I was desperate to get this done, and also giving you some really great camera angles. And I just mentioned I'm a photographer, and then I pull this kind of thing on you. So yeah, try to always loop your wires if you're supposed to, otherwise don't solder it like I did. But here's just kind of an initial test of connecting a battery and making sure that I had everything right. And I think I deleted the footage out of just pure rage and embarrassment probably, but I had done an initial wiring where I crossed the streams, Ray. No, I actually switched the wires around, and I did all of the soldering work and flipped the switch, and nothing worked. And I was just crushed, thinking, have I forgotten everything about very basic soldering? And sure enough, it was just because I had flipped them around. So just make sure that you're soldering the right wires to the right wires, or the correct parts of an LED strip. And if you're not sure, look it up, or just try to figure it out without doing your entire thing like me, because I was trying to knock it out super quick, and then you got to start over. And speaking of being a little impatient, you've been seeing this little clip here where I printed out this part of the pommel, went through the entire process and did the final painting, and thought, the doy, where are you gonna put the switch, dude? And so I thought, well, I could just drill some holes and then put this in there. But then I also remembered that fingers don't have 5 times more of the joints than they have, and I just couldn't fit it in there. I mean, I've sped this up, but it just was not working, dude. So I'll give you one guess what I did. Yep, reprinted. And I just used my slicer program to split it in half. That way I absolutely could get the switch in before I glued the two pieces together. I decided to print and sand and prime and all that in the halves, and then glue them together at the very end, so that I didn't have to contort my fingers somehow in an impossible way. But I also didn't have the foresight to, in Blender, cut out a little spot for the switch. So yeah, basically my pro tip here is don't rush it. Take your time. I was rushed because I was trying to do this and another project, actually 2 other projects by Halloween. But yeah, take your time. Make sure it gets done the right way. I did want to say that for this stage, I really had wished that I could have printed out the gems individually, because I wanted to sand them up, polish them up, and I actually wanted to create a mold and cast them into resin so I could make them a lot more translucent and gem-like. But my bamboo A1 with the nozzle size I have just wasn't cutting it, so I just put them into the model and painted them. So once I was pretty happy with how the gems looked and I glued it together, I started to fit the wires and the 9-volt all in the thing, and yes, that's how a switch works. See, on and off, pretty majestic. Now originally I was going to do a small LED bit that would go in between each little section of the white, but I got lazy and just ended up running the strip all the way to the bottom of the pommel. So another pro tip I'll give you guys is make sure you don't get LED strips with weather stripping if it's not going to be used outside. I have no idea why I decided to do this. I guess in my perhaps tired one night brain I thought, yes, I need to make sure this does not get wet while it's inside of a plastic 3D print. Because then, look, I ended up having to cut the rubber protection bit off the top, and it was a pain in the nerds, I'll tell you what. So yeah, make sure that you just get one that's not weatherproofed if it doesn't need to be weatherproofed. So I lied, I didn't delete the evidence of me messing up royally with the LED strips, and here you can very clearly see that they're matched up incorrectly. I mean, you can see the 12-volt is upside down on each piece, so that should have been the first indicator that I was doing this wrong. So make sure you line up your LEDs if you are connecting strips like this. Man, I'll tell you, I was so heartbroken too, because I'm, like I said, not a pro at this, but I felt like my soldering work was pretty decent. I mean, I was getting little droplets, connecting them, looked choice. Connecting it, and then boom, 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 boom. Wow, no good. So we're done with electronics, and I was super hyped. And as you can already see, it's not really diffused. I mean, you can see every bulb, and that's not what I was going for, but that's okay. This is my first attempt at this, and I will definitely learn from this project. Maybe next time I can manipulate the print settings, use a different material, something. If you've got any tips or tricks, please leave a comment, because I want to learn how to make this better in the future. Okay, so enough of the hilt and the electronics. Let's get into painting the blade. So we're going to start off by masking off our hilt with our grocery garbage bag. Coming in hot. Look at that hot mess. And kind of like I mentioned back in the blade phase of this video, I didn't really have a plan on the painting. I just kind of went with it. I've seen a lot of people do solid colors on their Rumi blade. I've seen them do maybe just a two-tone or a metallic. So I just kind of wanted to make mine look magical and ethereal. And I really liked how it turned out. I think we're ready to see the final version, but before we do, let's check out the smaller one that I built. Now let's check out the final version of Rumi Sword from Kpop Demon Hunters. Thank you guys so much for watching my first full-length video of creating Rumi Sword from Kpop Demon Hunters. If you like this, please subscribe and follow. I'm going to be making a lot more fun things and posting them here regularly, so make sure to come back and check out what I've got. See ya!